Hey, welcome, sports fans. Normally, in this slot is the Sideline Radio Show. This is Derek from the show. But, however, we're going to bring you something a little different this time. We always have guests on this show that talk to you how to be a better coach, be a better sport parent. We're going to teach you how to be a better you and get the focus on. We're going to talk about Jesus. But before you turn that dial, I think it's going to be a lot different talk than you've ever heard. And with me is Don Brzezinski from Cross Life Counseling. You've probably seen it on the corner of 27th and Aviation. And he's going to be here. He's going to talk about, it's great seminars we've gone to, retreats, me and my wife, and it's been a real big difference in our life and a lot of other people that we know. So I'm going to let Don talk a little bit more about himself and what they do over there. So Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you,
I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about what you do over there at Cross Life Counseling.
Well, as you know, Derek, Cross Life Counseling is a ministry, a nonprofit ministry here in Indian River County. We've been in this county for over 19 years, helping the folks of Indian River County, individuals, families, all walks of life, all kinds of issues. And not only are we nonprofit, and not only do we do counseling and training and missions, but we don't charge folks. We believe in helping people, so we are definitely a nonprofit. We are a donation-based ministry, and so the essence of what we're doing, Derek, is helping people with their typical issues that they come with. You know, who doesn't have a problem nowadays?
Right.
And this is a place where you can come that's confidential, a place that it's inviting. It's a place where you can share the things you really can't share with anyone else. But instead of trying to fix the behavioral issues that people have, that we all have, we begin to help them to understand their core identity, who they really are.
Right. And just real quick, it's so funny because we talk about this all the time on the sports show about, instead of, not putting that performance pressure on your kids, and that's not their identity, and your self-worth is not in your kid's performance. But sometimes it morphs into that, and we kind of lose track of really the main thing. We think it's all about us, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we talked about that before we came on, is about the identity issue, and that's probably the core of most things with most people is, who are they? What is their identity? Where do they draw their source of spiritual source from, and who they are, and then the performance gig. So it's so funny because we've had David Benzel for Growing Champions for Life. I've talked to you a couple of times about the guy from ESPN, and he puts it all in sports terms, but it's a lot of stuff I've learned from you. He says it, and then sometimes it clicks for me. I'm kind of, Jason and I kind of both have rocks in our heads. So sometimes you got to beat us a few times to get a crack to let the water in. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's just fantastic. Like I said, I know so many people that have been radically changed and helped, just their eyes open. And again, that performance base, because a lot of people have been through the church thing. And it's not a church thing here at all. And then one other thing I'm going to say before I let you talk a little more is, especially to our guys, a lot of people, very prideful guys, don't want to talk about stuff, and they hear the word counseling. And, like I was that way. My wife was going there. She was having all these revelations, great stuff, has made a huge difference in her life. And then she's like, maybe you should go in there. And I'm like, counseling? I'm not going to counseling. I don't need counseling. You need counseling. So that whole pride kind of thing comes in, man. It's really not. It's just, just talking to you is just talking to someone, is just a friend, someone you can trust, and you work out your walk, your identity, and your issues together. And that's the way it's meant to be.
Well, that's so true, Derek. We are in such a performance-driven society. In fact, as you really begin to think about it, why do people do what they do? What's the driving force behind human beings, regardless of the culture, regardless of where we grew up, where we're raised? We can really observe that every individual wants what we might call a fulfilling, satisfying life.
Right.
And so, there's that fulfillment, satisfaction drive. And, kind of behind that is, we want personal worth, a personal, acceptance. And then as you look at that a little more clearly, you begin to discover that there are really two key needs that every human being has, and that we can't live without. And frankly, I believe that they're God-given needs. Okay. And the one is security, and the other is significance or worth.
Right.
And we are spending our entire lives looking for something or someone that can meet those core issues in our lives.
Yeah, but the problem is all those other things tend to come up short.
Yes, well, of course they do.
And we spend billions of dollars also getting self-help books to try to answer those two questions.
Well, and the problem with that, Derek, is that the burden is on us.
Right.
Because it's self-help. So who does it begin with? It begins with me. The sooner that we discover in life that there's got to be something bigger than ourselves, the sooner that we're on to something.
So it's not about me.
Everything seems to revolve around me, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it doesn't work, does it?
Right. Everybody says that. I got to make me happy. I got to fix me first. You hear all that. I'm sure you hear all that. Probably one of the main things you probably hear, I think we talked about before, is, there's no like checklist that I can go down to fix myself, or fix others.
Right. Well, we all have, we have stuff that's broke. We have problems we're facing. So we become desperate. And when we're finally desperate enough that we go to ask somebody for help, we're really desperate.
Right. Yeah.
And then we want answers. Mm-hmm. We want solutions. We kind of live in this microwave society where, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Right. And the problem with that is, once again, the burden rests squarely on you. So if we don't discover something bigger than ourselves, i.e. God, an identity as God intended us to have, and find the resources, frankly, outside of ourselves, to be able to function and live the way that God intended us to live, we're going to probably spend the majority of our lives discovering that we can't make it work.
Right. It's kind of, like I said, every time you rely on yourself and you have a checklist, that's why people, quote unquote, get burnt out, or they start getting angry because it's not working. And the problem is they're relying on themselves.
Yes.
And you have a famous quote. I love it. How's that working for you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. If you work it long enough, you'll get to the place where you're broken.
Okay.
And then you'll realize that I really do need something more than what I have. We talked earlier about security and significance. There's a deep longing within each one of us where we want to know that we're accepted. Do you like being rejected? No, nobody does. And yet we all have been. Mm-hmm. We have a deep longing to know that we're loved. Now, guys are maybe a little more squirmish about that, but the bottom line is we want to know that we're loved.
Right.
We have a longing to know that we're needed, that we're wanted, that we're understood, and that's a big one for the ladies.
Right.
Kind of the deepest need of their life is to know that somebody understands them, and frankly, they feel like nobody understands me. Another aspect of security is the fact that that we're really cared for, that we're missed. Have you ever been away somewhere for 2-3 weeks and then come back to your group or your club or whatever, and nobody knew you're gone? Like, really? You didn't miss me? Those are security issues. I need to know that I'm appreciated. What about this one? I need to know that I'm trusted.
Right.
When somebody questions your integrity, it's at the core of your security. It's the core of your identity. In fact, when we look at the security, the fact that we need to know that we're accepted and loved and needed and wanted and understood and cared for and missed and appreciated and trusted, what we're really talking about is that I, as an individual, am important and special and precious to someone. Now, we've spent our whole lives on this fulfillment, satisfaction search, looking for that someone. Now, for some of us, there have been a lot of someones.
Right.
But nobody's been able to fit the bill.
Right.
Because frankly, there's only one person that can, and that's the creator who designed us to be relationally dependent upon him.
Right.
And so what we discover is that security is directly linked to who am I? You see, if I don't know that I'm secure, I don't know who I am, i.e., I question my identity. And so now I'm back to a behavioral modification search to try to figure it out.
Right. And the problem for some people is behavior modification sometimes works for a time. But the problem is again, it's putting a Band-Aid on an axe wound.
Yeah, it reminds me of these TV commercials for the latest and the greatest drug, you know?
Right.
Yeah, they got 60 seconds of telling you all the side effects to the drug.
Right.
But somehow it's going to be beneficial for you.
But it's going to make my elbow feel better.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have that elbow pain anymore, but I'm vomiting, I have diarrhea, I got a rash.
And the
I
fact
can't
it could
sleep.
kill you, but
I
other
have
than
headaches.
that, it's good.
I have headaches, and I might die tomorrow, but my elbow feels better.
Exactly. Well, we think we're doing something. You see,
Right.
Once again, we're kind of medicating the pain of the rejection that we all have, not really understanding the core issue of having those things resolved.
So what you're saying, though, is it may not be a good idea to try to have another flawed person fill those needs. And that's what we all do, right?
We do. We can't live without relationship,
Right.
so we tend to look to one another to try to fill that relationship void.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly God will place people in our lives to come alongside and be relational with us. But really, we don't even know what the essence of relationship is until we've really discovered the God who is relational. You know, God is a triune God. He is three persons.
Right.
And so, he's been in this thing a lot longer than we have. And he was the one that said, let's make man in our image, in our likeness. So here the relational God said, let's make man and let's allow him to enjoy the relationship of love that we've always enjoyed. And let's share this, because true relationship, Derek, is always for another. Relationship is always others oriented. It's not me oriented. It's not self-oriented.
Right.
It's that others may live, which is frankly the motto of Cross Life.
Yeah, the others may live. So, and it really comes down to in the first part of one of your seminars it's who's the point of reference.
Absolutely.
And it kind of starts right there. I mean, we've sort of talked about already, the problem is we always make ourselves the point of reference.
Yes, we do. And there's a lot of reasons for that. That we feel like that we can solve our problems, that we can do our own thing. It's really the essence of secular humanism. And where did that whole thing develop? Where did that come from? Did somebody just kind of just get that out of thin air? No, if we go back and understand a biblical sequence of history, we can discover a lot of things about ourselves, including where some of these false precepts came from and how we've developed into the me-conscious, behavioral-oriented people that we've become.
Right. And again, it's your point of reference. You're talking about also relationship, not performance. And is that pretty much where everybody's really caught up in that? You're basically in that gerbil wheel, aren't you?
Yes.
And it's never going to stop.
A lot of people think that this statement is true.
Okay.
That I am because I do. I am because I do. We teach that. We teach that in all society. We teach it in sports. We teach it in education. We teach it on the job. That, you are measured by your performance. And then we begin to measure ourselves and we begin to judge others based on performance. But the reality is that identity is not based on performance. It's in fact, it doesn't even begin with you. It has to begin with the one who created you and the essence of why he created you, for you to discover your true identity, or what we help people to understand, their identity in Christ.
Right. And that's why you call it the Christ life.
Exactly.
Because it's life, that he really came to give us. It's not this performance gig. It's not I do this, do that, and you're going to succeed or fail, and you're going to be high and low and all that. It's not that. It's just your identity should be in Him, and you're just walking with Him. Talk a little bit more about that, because that was like a big revelation for me to get out of especially I think as a sports guy, like you said it, the performance kick is there. So, I mean, I think it's in all walks of life, but especially, as a sports guy, I talk to a lot of people in the little spin on it in sports. As I said, instead of being, it's gotten worse and worse here recently with everybody really being in performance-based stuff, as opposed to like being on a path of discovery and enjoying the process, and just kind of participating in the sport and just being and learning and growing. And what does the sport have for you? I think the joy has been robbed from a lot of kids that way. And I think subsequently, if we cross back over to what we're talking about, I think the performance gig has robbed a lot of joy from a lot of us.
Well, it is. And when you're performing, you're performing from a point of reference. You're performing from a basis.
Right.
So if you're performing from your own, from yourself, then you're the essence of who you are.
Right.
And the whole burden's upon you. I think at some point people come to realize that there is something bigger than themselves. There is a God. They may not understand the essence of God or how to relate to God, but they realize that unless there is something bigger than themselves, then they're really stuck. Somebody said it this way, that God can only be known to the extent that God reveals Himself. You see, the problem is all through history, all the way back through the philosophers of Plato and Aristotle, and then into even Christendom, where you had Augustine and Thomas Aquinas and kind of the doctors of theology. It was almost like man kind of sat on the front porch of the earth and kind of gazed into the heavens, and man was going to determine and understand God. And that we would do so either by inductive or deductive reasoning. In other words, once again, it was the burden was on man, and that we were going to understand, and that we were going to figure out who God was and how to relate to Him, and then the rest would solve itself. The reality is, man cannot understand God apart from God revealing Himself to man.
Right, and that also brings me to something that I wrote down that meant a lot to me. It resonated with me, and that was, it's impossible to have a healthy relationship with God without a right concept of who He is.
Exactly.
And so my question to you would be, how does somebody get to that point where they're looking for that? How do they get off the performance treadmill when half the people don't really know they're on it, right? And then what do you tell the person who's maybe not sure? They tried church. You know what I'm saying? I was there, didn't work for me, or they're all hypocrites. They whatever. We talked about someone questioned their security, all that. But so how do you tell them this is different? This is not just another, I went from the Baptist church to the Lutheran church, or I went to the charismatic church, or, I went to this one. I tried this flavor. I didn't like it. I tried this flavor. Oh, I liked that one for a while. But then somebody ticked me off, so I don't like it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get a person out of that, or is it they have to you have to hit that brokenness point? Is it?
Well, first of all, we're not talking about churchianity.
Yeah, churchianity, right?
And true biblical Christianity is not religion either.
Right.
Christianity is not religion. Religion is really the lie of the enemy of man, who tried to get man to be distracted from God into a performance gig. Right. And if you go clear back to the garden, when the serpent was deceiving Adam and Eve, what was his question to Adam and Eve as they're standing before the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which God had already told them, not to eat from, but rather to eat freely from the tree of life. The question that Satan posed to Adam was, wouldn't you like to be like God?
Right. We all want to be our own God.
Yeah.
We want to be God of ourselves.
Wouldn't you like to know, like God does, the difference between good and evil? Because that'd solve all your problems. Then you could decide what was right and wrong, what was good and evil. And ever since then, the whole human race has been stuck in that performance-based good and evil, trying to figure out what works.
Right. But like I said, getting to the core question, how do you come to that realization? Someone might hear us talking in our words and say, it might be peeking at them because it's resonating with them, because truth does, the truth will set you free, they say, right? So it's piquing somebody's interest, but he's like, I'm not sure. Is this just some other little thing? And how do they know? The
first thing that we have to understand is we have to start with God.
Right.
God is who he is, and God does what he does because he is who he is. And one of the things about God is he is a personal, intimate God. God is love. God is good. And so because God created man, for man to experience loving, intimate relationship and experience his life and purpose through the journey that man would have, we realize that God's personalness, he reveals himself to man. And so apart from God revealing himself to man, man's never going to discover. And as you've already alluded to, Derek, oftentimes we've tried everything else. And when we finally get to the place where we said, you know what, I don't know what works, it hasn't worked, and I am a broken man, then I can cry out to God, and God is always faithful to reveal himself to us. So our knowledge of God comes only by means of God, not by our thinking, not by our reasoning. Now, we have reasoning and thinking ability that's God-given, but really the understanding comes from the revelation that God gives.
Right, and that's got to be tough for a lot of people who they want to figure things out. They are smart. They know what things are. See, I think that point was kind of easy for me because I'm just stupid. So explain this to me in small words, and so I can understand. It's I think it's kind of easy for me. But then there's some people, I know some people that I can't understand half the words they say. They're, I call them the $5 words because I know the 5-cent words, but they're so smart, but it's just so hard for them to wrap their head around that. Again, it's not about you.
Jesus had a similar conversation with the Father about some of the arrogant people that he dealt with there in Matthew chapter 11. And he visited several different cities in what we know as the Middle East. And he kind of spoke a woe because many of those, he had done many miracles, performed many signs, and many of those folks didn't get it. And then he said to the Father, he essentially said, Father, I'm so glad that you have hidden these things from the wise and the intelligent, and that you have revealed them to infants, to babes. What was he saying? He was saying, look, we created man as a dependent, derivative creature. Well, what does that mean? That means that human beings they receive everything that they are from one of two spiritual sources. And here's man arrogantly enough saying, I don't need God. I can do my own thing. And Jesus is saying to the Father, you know what? I'm so glad that we've decided
kept it from the prideful.
To keep it from the prideful. That we'll reveal it to the needy person, the one who recognizes they have needs, the one who's given up on performance, the one who truly does want to discover intimate relationship and security and significance in their life.
Right. And we're going to take a break. It's going to be, you're going to hear some Fox News. We're going to talk about some nonsense going on in the world. Then we'll be back with something a little more meaningful on a personal level to you and what you can use. So we'll be back right after the break.